Representative Rosemary Brown calls up House Bill 37, printer number 2058, page 7 of today's House calendar. Please read a summary of the bill.
This bill prohibits the use of handheld interactive wireless communication devices while operating a motor vehicle.
There are a number of amendments here. We're going to start with Representative Brown's amendments, 3273. Please read a summary.
Amendment 3273 is an entire redraft of House Bill 37. The redraft establishes the ban on using an interactive wireless communication device while a person is operating a motor vehicle on a highway or a traffic way.
On the amendment, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. This amendment is actually a gut and replace amendment for House Bill 37. After months of work and coming to different agreements among what legislators' feedback, basically the amendment prohibits the use of an interactive wireless communication device, a cell phone, while a person is operating a motor vehicle on a highway or traffic way. Let me remind you, as an adult, 18 or older, and you are still able to use your cell phone through a Bluetooth or a GPS or on speakerphone. It also states that if you are 18 and under, or if you are under 18, may not control a cell phone while operating a motor vehicle on a highway or traffic way. The fine is $150. It's a summary offense. It is deposited into the motor license fund, and there's no restricted account attached to this amendment. If a municipal officer cites you, it is $12.50 goes to the municipal corporation, with the remaining $137.50 which goes to the motor license fund. Basically, Mr. Speaker, that is a gut and replacement once again to House Bill 37, and I would ask for the members' support of this legislation amendment.
Representative Briggs, on the amendment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Brown amendment. This amendment approves the bill and addresses the real danger of distracted driving. The goals of the bill are to enhance driver safety and reduce distractions, and I think this is amendment that helps accomplish that. Please join me in voting for Amendment 3273. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Before Representative Brown, before you speak a second time, just let me make sure nobody else wants to speak. Representative Brown for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for clarification, this is not a guarantee, but it does make us eligible for some of the federal funds, which is also a benefit for us as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Members, please proceed to vote. Have all the members voted? And the clerk will record the vote. The yeas are 180, the nays are 16. The amendment passes. Now I have 3 amendments by Representative Heffley, 4 amendments by Representative Diamond, another one by Representative Brown, and 3 by Representative Bullock. Representative Brown, you're going to offer 2824. Are you offering that amendment? That's off? That's off. Representative Heffley. Sir, you have 4 amendments, 3 amendments. Are you offering all 3, sir? Representative Heffley calls up Amendment 03274. Please read a summary.
Amendment 3274 is an amendment to Amendment 3273 as amended to make the violation a secondary offense.
Representative Heffley, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would encourage my colleagues to consider and vote in favor of this amendment. What this amendment will do, it will set the same standard that we have for seatbelts, in which we have about 85 to 90% compliance with our seatbelt law here in the Commonwealth, and it sets it as a secondary offense. So if there is an incident of reckless driving, careless driving, an accident, and a person is found to have been on their phone or using the text messages at that time, then they would receive a penalty. It's good to note that this secondary offense will only qualify to those adults that are 18 and over. So it will still be a primary offense to use a handheld device for younger drivers between the ages of 16 to 18. I think this is important that we keep this as a secondary offense. Many folks are responsible and perfectly capable of holding a phone and holding a conversation and driving a car at the same time. For years, the heavy truck industry has utilized CB radios to communicate. There's no difference in holding a CB radio in your hand or holding a cell phone in your hand. If you're distracted and looking away, dialing a phone or texting, that's distracted driving. And if you get in an incident or an accident because of it, you're going to be cited for it. I think it's very important that this provision go into this bill. I think it makes it a much better bill, much more palatable. And just a couple of the different things that you're going to hear about driver safety. Note that in 2012, the federal government implemented a handheld ban for commercial drivers. But yet, since 2012 to 2019, heavy truck accidents have increased. So it really isn't the evidence or proof that this is an end-all, be-all to make our roads safer. The number one leading indicator that somebody's going to have an accident is if they've ever had a citation received for following too close. Most of our accidents are rear-end collisions. I've worked in the industry for several years. I've conducted safety meetings. I've done a lot of studies in regard to driver safety in the heavy truck industry, and I think that this amendment will make this bill a better bill for all the residents of Pennsylvania, and I believe that we will have about 85 to 90% compliance. So I would ask for a favorable vote.
Representative Vitale, sir, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise in support of the Heffley amendment. I think it's a very common sense amendment, and it's sort of reflective of how many people, in fact, conduct themselves. I'm just going to tell you very honestly, this morning as I was coming into Harrisburg, I was using my cell phone on the turnpike. I set criteria for myself, which I think others can do, which makes it safe. My rule of thumb is no cell phone use until I get to the turnpike and get far enough in until traffic has died down and the risks are very small. And then I will make some calls, and then by the time I get close to exiting the turnpike, my rule of thumb is not to use it any further, because I don't want to get involved in using the cell phone when there are driving decisions to be made, such as highways to get on and lane changes and so forth. But there is, in fact, a very long stretch of the turnpike where, frankly, I believe a cell phone, if used carefully, used with discretion, can be helpful. If I want to dial, I may pull over, make the dial, and then drive once I'm on the road so my eyes don't have to leave the highway. But I do think if a person sets standards for himself, driving with a cell phone can be done safely. Now, if a person is not acting correctly, that can be evidenced by some of the things that the Heffley bill contemplates, such as the other road infractions, such as weaving or speeding or whatever. But I do think this is a common sense amendment that reflects the way our constituents drive on an everyday basis, and I would ask for an affirmative vote.
Thank you, sir. Representative Briggs, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose the Heffley amendment. This weakens highway safety by making texting while driving a secondary offense. Some of you may remember 2012, we fought hard to make it a primary offense. The goals of this bill are to make our highways safer and reduce distractions. This amendment does not further the goals of this bill, and I ask for a negative vote on Amendment 3274.
And before I call on Representative Heffley, anybody else that wishes to speak on? Oh, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, oppose this amendment. I believe it does weaken the bill. One of the important pieces that the members should know about this amendment is that it keeps the primary offense to under 18, but over 18 and over turns into a secondary offense. Because of the amendment and how House Bill, the last amendment we just passed, the previous texting law that's in place is replaced by this new legislation. Our previous texting law had texting as a primary offense. If you were to move this to a secondary offense now, you are actually weakening our texting law, which has already been on the books, and as many of you know, has already been extremely ineffective and unable to be enforced. I ask for a negative vote on this to make sure that we make the most effective bill to help safety on our roadways. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Doyle Heffley on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the last speaker said it well. The primary offense for texting has been extremely ineffective and hard to enforce. Ineffective and hard to enforce. The primary for texting. This would make it a secondary. If you want to go back and put another amendment in and make it a primary, I'm okay with that. But I don't think we should turn every Pennsylvania who drives down the road with a phone on their lap into a criminal, right? There's a lot of issues that we have on our roadways. Texting and driving, I would advise nobody to do it. Talking on the phone while you're driving, holding a phone in your hand, holding a CB in your hand, holding a cup of coffee in your hand, putting on makeup, reading a book, all kinds of crazy things that people do. And yeah, it is funny, but I have driven down the road and seen people reading the newspaper at their steering wheel or reading a book. That's not illegal. But if they get in an accident and they were proven to be distracted driving, it's a secondary offense. They're going to get fined. If they're swerving all over the road, we need to stop making every Pennsylvania a criminal. It's important to note that if somebody's driving down the road and they see an accident or an unsafe condition along the road, they can call or use their Waze app to put that information into the system. The touch screens on new cars are much more distractive than holding a phone in your hand. So I would ask that we vote for the Pennsylvanians, vote for the folks that are going to work, vote for the mom that's calling to check up on their children on their way home from work. Don't make it that you have to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to put a Bluetooth system or a hands-free system in your phone if you can't afford it. So if you can afford to have these new systems hands-free, you can then talk on the phone. If you can't afford them, you can't talk on the phone. Let's keep this a secondary offense. It has been overwhelmingly effective with our seatbelt policy in the state. 85 to 90% compliance for drivers in Pennsylvania to wear their seatbelt as a secondary offense. It's a primary offense for children under 18 to not have a seatbelt on, but it's a secondary for adults, and most adults, 85 to 90% of them, are compliant as a secondary. This bill can be very effective, and I would have asked for an affirmative vote on this amendment. Thank you, sir, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Harris, do you want to speak on this? Yes, please go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the Heffley amendment. I know, shocker. I know. Let's keep it. The reason why I support the Heffley amendment is because while I understand driver safety, and driver safety is important, I don't know how a police officer is able to dictate or judge whether you're texting, whether you're using your GPS, or what you're doing. I honestly believe we should reduce this to a secondary offense because I don't think we should be giving more reasons for people to be pulled over in our Commonwealth. When we're not collecting the data, the racial demographics, we're not collecting anything currently, I think the Heffley Amendment is another way to ensure that we're not pulling people over for just nefarious reasons. And I'm concerned that without this amendment, if the bill goes forward, you'll see more and more people being able to be pulled over and they won't really have a defense when they get to court because it'll all be based off of what one person says. In our history, when you open that door, people of color and disadvantaged folks in our community are usually the ones who feel the brunt. And because of that, I will be voting in favor to protect people with the Heffley Amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Brown, for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for clarity, the reason that this legislation is truly needed is because it does give a much clearer and enforceable manner that our enforcement can recognize the use of a cell phone. That is one reason why the texting law has been so ineffective. By hands-free, not holding the phone, not touching the phone, not having it supported by your shoulder or any part of your body, truly helps make it more effective. Let's face it, our people are asking us to make some sort of difference or help with this legislation and with this situation of safety. It is absolutely a concern in our Commonwealth. We are behind our efforts legislatively to help our roadways. If you think that this is not important to your people, you are, I think, completely wrong. This is a true safety issue. I absolutely do not support this amendment. This amendment weakens our current texting law, which is actually, as I said earlier, ineffective. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do ask for a no vote.
Representative Quartz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Heffley Amendment, and I want to thank the gentleman for bringing this forward. The gentleman from Philadelphia was exactly spot on. We don't need to give the police additional reasons to pull people over. They could be using the GPS on a phone, which is allowed under the law, but the policeman won't know that. He's just going to pull people over. So how's a policeman going to know if you're using the GPS or not? Or if you're calling in an emergency because you saw an accident at mile marker 121. I think we should follow this and vote yes for the Heffley Amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I don't see anybody else that wishes to speak on the Heffley Amendment. All those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Members, please proceed to vote. Have all the members voted? Have all the members voted? We're about to close the vote, and the clerk will record the vote. The yeas are 117, the nays are 79. The amendment passes. Representative Heffley is not offering 3304. Representative Heffley, are you offering 3354? Okay, that's withdrawn too. Representative Diamond offers, that's all of them off, Representative? Okay. Representative Rothman, are all of your amendments withdrawn? Okay. Representative Bullock. Representative Bullock has 2878. Representative Bullock, are you offering your three amendments?
Mr. Speaker, I'll be withdrawing those amendments, but I'd like to speak on them.
Yes, absolutely. You may speak, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to say that I appreciate Representative Brown's efforts in introducing legislation to keep motorists, pedestrians, and others safe on our highways and roadways. When I first introduced this amendment, I had concerns that it would inappropriately be used by state troopers to harass black and brown motorists. My amendment would require law enforcement to record and maintain certain data for motorists pulled over under this bill to ensure that the ban is not being used to target these motorists or as a cover when pulling over motorists without cause. I've seen similar amendments in for handheld cell bans in Massachusetts and other states. Studies have shown that black and brown motorists are more likely to be pulled over for traffic violations, and I was concerned that this bill will only increase cases of racial profiling. My concerns were validated by several news stories of public complaints of racial profiling by our state troopers. This does not take into account those motorists who are pulled over by local police departments. Without this data, it is difficult to counter the outcome of the internal investigation process or to even analyze trends of systemic racial profiling or other harmful practices that may inform better policing policies and keep both motorists and police officers safe. My concerns were further validated by the news that our state troopers no longer report or maintain this demographic information. While I support the underlying bill because distracted drivers are a danger to everyone, I must also think about the potential impact of this bill on my community and on drivers who look like me. Many of us in this chamber do not understand what it means to be black and brown behind the steering wheel. The maker of this bill and I have agreed to meet, and we will continue to meet with our state troopers because we understand that it's not just about racial profiling under this bill and for motorists pulled over for cell phone use, but also to look at the reality that our state troopers no longer pull over motorists when they pull over motorists, no longer take down that information. And so we'll be looking at a bill and working with our state troopers to introduce legislation or work on policy to address those concerns. And with that, I'll be withdrawing my amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Brown, for what purpose do you rise?
In regards to the amendment, withdrawn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No, but all the amendments are withdrawn.
Okay. I just wanted to thank the maker of the amendments for working with me, Mr. Speaker, and making sure we both have the same concerns in regards to fairness and make sure all our drivers are respected. I want to thank her for her hard work with me on this and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further amendments. Will the House agree to the bill? It is agreed to as amended, and the bill moves to third consideration.